like touring with Dime and Vinny? That's a good one.
It was amazing. I wasn't like a kid who like I was a very big Pantera fan. More of like Iron Maiden fans and shredder guitar players, but Dimebag was obviously on my radar as far as being one of my favorite guitar players. But I was never like a guy who went home and watched all the DVDs and tried to like emulate that in my own life. Like, oh, we got to party like them. Like, that'd be cool for our band. You know?
You'd be dead.
Yeah, well, yes.
Any normal human being that tries to party like Pantera 3 is just, you're going to die.
Yeah, I will say that I learned very quickly how to drink up to their caliber. They let us in on a few secret tips. But Dimebag he was very awesome, very caring. We were the first band on the bill, and he would always come find me specifically and like ask me to hang out and do things. And then when we were even not on tour, he'd invite me places and hang out. They're really generous and caring, and it's the worst tragedy I think I've ever, like musically, that I've ever endured with him and Vinny. And it was the worst thing ever. But reflecting back on it, it was some of the best times I've ever had in my life. Like Dime was truly had no ego, didn't talk shit, always into fun. He would just like roll up to you and be like, yeah, let's go light fireworks. And then you're like, all right, cool, we're gonna go in a parking lot somewhere? No. The opening band of whatever fucking band was playing on the tour would be lighting like M80s on his cymbals while he's performing. And that was just how he rolled. And he was a money machine too, he'd just hand you money. He'd be like, hey, there's a lamp on behind you. How many lights are on? And I'm like, 2. He's like, 3, close, here's $100, you know? And they're like, great, this is great. Because I think he knew that $100 would buy me like a week or 3 weeks of Subway. So I was pretty psyched, but I did definitely gambling it. I'd roll for it. He would kind of try to come back and get it later playing CeeLo. But Dime was literally one of the greatest and kindest spirits I've ever met. Not a negative thing ever to say.
So now let me ask you this. Music, what the fuck's going on with you guys? I feel like the music industry has...
It's crumbling
since COVID. It's like watching Rome burn.
No.
Like, can you do this anymore? Like, do you still live at your mom's house?
No. I always lived on a cul-de-sac with my whole family, and I did make records though. It was actually pretty convenient. My parents have this like massive house. My brother lives on the other side, and I bought the house next to them. And I used to go from my house to theirs. And I put the studio in their house specifically so I could go eat dinner with them every night. It was kind of like a win-win situation for me. But no, listen, we're all Boston jaded dudes here. I get it, but I will say that even though I think maybe your perspective of the music industry being crumbling or being terrible or people are not into rock like
we say that about everything in Boston.
Right. But I'm gonna say this: there is hope. I really do feel like YouTube and all the streaming media and all that stuff. There are some amazing bands, and you have to kind of dig for them a bit. But I'm gonna say there's such a prolific scene in California, Chicago, Boston, Texas. There's a lot of great bands coming up, and especially hardcore and heavy metal, like new bands like Lana Shore, Wage War, Turnstile. Like there is a whole new scene coming up, and it's like actually really vibrant and exciting. So it gives me hope. Rock-wise, my ear is to the street. There are some cool bands like Starcrawler and there's weird art bands like Sloppy Jane and like Pom Pom Squad, and like there's so many bands that they're on my radar. I could go on and on. I just think this is actually a really amazing time for music because it's the Wild West, because like no band is like mainstream, right? And you're not hearing on the radio like AAF and like every day, like if AAF is still a thing.
Rip.
Right. You would say like, oh, Godsmack's the greatest band in the world, rock's alive, But the world isn't like that anymore. You just have to dig a little bit further, and then you start realizing how big these bands actually are, and you'd never ever heard of them.
Well, I have to say this as a producer. You're right about I say the Wild West because now that there isn't like a trend, the trend is dead. Right, so if you write some weird fucking artsy metal, like as much as back in the day, maybe you couldn't go play the Lucky Dog, you can put that online and there's somebody in Germany going, I've been waiting for you all my life.
I agree. The way I search for music is that I go on YouTube, right? And then you have a subcategory always, like a next video up, right? Kind of thing. So one day I was like, I go on these musical journeys and I say, well, Kraftwerk.
I call it acid.
Right, Kraftwerk was like an electronic band that was famous. I want to find an electronic band that's out now that I think is cool. So I'd watch a Kraftwerk video, I'd go in the YouTube column and I'd just say, like Kraftwerk kind of thing. And you keep digging, hitting videos that like kind of look cool, and then the next thing you know, you step on an artist that you're like, fuck. There's an LA-based girl who's like an art scene kind of girl. Her name's Geneva Jacuzzi. I'm way into it. It's very like simplified, also sophisticated at times, but it's just like Kraftwerk-ish. And she's very artistic, puts on these elaborate concerts, shows, underground, totally awesome. Another band, This band called Sloppy Jane out of, I believe, California and / New York. I found this band kind of the same way, and now they're starting to get big, but they're more artsy and way more like they're different. But the initial like Sloppy Jane experience for me was a song called Mindy, and this girl is just like her. She was known for like ripping off her clothes, playing naked, spitting out blue stuff. Like it was crazy. But when I saw them play, and I think the music's good, she was the most like punk rock thing I've seen in the past like 10 years.
Over time, there's always a resurgence. So it dies for a little bit, but just when you think that the ashes are out, it comes back up. I remember, 20 years ago, you could go play Loco Bazooka, which is a big festival, and you could play for 20,000 people, and people would show up and they'd buy tickets and all of that. And then we slowly watched as we had to pay to play all the time, and things like diminished and all that. But do you find that like because that's been so pushed down that now everyone's kind of rising from the ashes of that and figuring out new ways to make it through that are smarter than us old guys?
Yeah, no. That's a really good question. I actually do feel like so Local Bazooka and all these like random festivals, people will never stop trying to put like 30,000 bands on one show just to make profit, right? But I will say that the problem is that most of these bands are so active that the ones that you don't know and the ones that you do know, that you kind of get sick and you get desensitized. Especially on a bill where there's like 50 bands, it's tough to decipher which band really blew you open. And like, there's always like one band that stands out, and then like you see them a second time, and then you're like, okay, now I trust it. So I think people will always make music and people will always throw festivals, but we've been there and done it so much that it's not special anymore. So what I think is special is that these kids are like this. Kids are finding creative ways to get known. Bands are playing at Denny's. You know what I mean? Like they're just plugging in amps and ripping that. There's people that are like making like their own like vehicle that opens up and they.
Are there even record contracts anymore? Like, 'cause think about it. There was a linear method when we were growing up. It's like you got on the radio, you got on MTV, you got a record contract. You heard about you saw hey, the record labels were here today. Like maybe we're getting scouted out. That doesn't even fucking matter at this point. Now it's like. Even if you get put out, people, and music's completely devalued.
Yeah, but when you say it's devalued, I'm not going to argue the point. I think it's just too much. I think it's too much information and sensory overload.
I'm with you on that.
But I'm saying the bands that do it right are the ones that do put out a single. Oh,
well, they keep the momentum going, but it's different than how it used to be.
Research the band Turnstile. Are you familiar with Turnstile?
I'm not familiar with anybody after Pantera.
Check out what that band's got going on.
Turnstile.
They're just like right now, I feel like at this point, 2022, today, I feel like they're one of the biggest bands like out there. It's like somewhere in between like, for someone who's never heard them, Rage Against the Machine and like pure like punk rock. Kind of like commercially.
That's awesome.
And it's happy and it sounds like hardcore and it's positive, it's positivity and it's aggression. But they have done the greatest organic job of just like releasing material. Their records mean something, their singles mean something, their videos mean something, and they don't give a fuck because it's not like in a box. It's not like a label told them how to package it. I think that if you see that band, you'll find other bands like that, and you'll have a different perspective.
There is one band like that for me, and it's only because I play with Siobhan. Starset, these guys, they wear spacesuits, they have their own, he wrote his own science fiction novel, so when people come, they actually know of their whole universe. They, when I asked Dustin, the lead singer, they just surpassed 2 billion streams according to Forbes. I didn't realize they were
And they're probably still living in their parents' house.
They're doing pretty well, but the funny part is that Dustin, the lead singer, I asked him, so what made you want Ron, your bass player? And he goes, oh, he's got a great operational mind. He's good with logistics. Nothing to do with bass.
I know.
Now it's not just about can you play music. It's like, are you good at marketing? Do you know how to do Instagram? Like, can you go and can you figure out how to spend money well so that you can actually get people to come in? Like, do you know how to build a DMX 512 protocol chain so you can have a light show?
You're a great producer, and all I can say is this, that you were probably considered that guy in your scene 20 years ago. Oh, this guy fucking uses Pro Tools. What
I know,
a nerd.
right?
Probably has no pants on when he records. Like
Which I don't. That's actually accurate. That's my goal.
Yeah.
Ken. It's been to like literally not leave my house, just to sit with my cat, smoke my joint in my underwear, and never have to leave my house.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm trying to say is that you were perceived as that then, and now you are a little bit older and weathered, and you are. And I'm not saying weathered in a bad way.
I mean,
I'm just saying
look at the bag under my eyes. I need fillers.
I'm just saying that the way you're perceiving it, I get it. I think these kids are just like way more. They're smarter and more sophisticated, and
they have to be.
They're adaptable than we are.
If you're 21 years old, you may have been alive at a time where literally the entirety of your life, no one has ever paid for anything musical that you do.
Yeah.
So unless you're playing shows or selling merchandise, there's no way to actually do it. So they're having to figure out how to do this outside the box. So this linear method that had been devised as we grew up to be the rock star, now it's like 100%, like it's turned to like a 180.
I can counter that and say that there's 13-year-old kids that are on YouTube playing video games that are making more money than their parents. So
yes, there are.
All I'm going to say to that is that even though we had amazing publishing situations, management, Sakihana dinners, you know, like sushi, like with label brown nosers and shit, like all I can say is that it's a different time, and like it sucks for the bands that like can't make money and they don't have the following, but the ones that do, like they're actually banking pretty well. Like some kids do well. Like look at I really like Attila Franz. Like he did his own merch company. He's always online. He's always pushing his stuff. And for what it's worth, like or hate that band, the guy's hustling hard. And there's avenues to make money.
I saw the end of the world. I was at XS in Vegas about 10 years ago. I played some shows with Cascade. That dude used to do 2 shows a night, 500 grand, 100 grand right off the top, would go to his manager, he'd make 400. And the hotel provided the Pioneer tables that he used. So he would come with just a jump drive. And that was it. And there'd be catering and back, and he'd make 400 grand in 2.5 hours of people rolling their face off in Vegas paying $200 a drink.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, as a musician, there's no way that you could ever, like, unless you're Mick Jagger doing $50,000 meet and greets, you still can't make what a DJ does. You don't even have to bring any amps. You don't have to have a sound guy. Like, your sound is literally check 1, 2 line.
I know.
Did your headphones work?
Well, all I'm gonna say
DJ
is
Susi.
I sound I'd be more like DJ Tanner. But but no, all I'm gonna say is that
I'm more of a Bob Saget.
So basically, what we're getting out of this interview is that we made bad life choices, and we should have gotten electronics more.
Yeah,
that's all I'm gonna say. But no, I'm very positive about the music industry. I see all this stuff, and like there is some old guard and some new guard kind of mashed together, because I can make the argument too, like Testament, Anthrax, Exodus, like all these bands are still, even the OG ones are going out, and kids are like, oh my God,
we just shot Testament last week. We were hanging out with Skolnick, who we did a similar thing like this with. As we're doing this, people are yelling at him walking down the street. It was the most packed I've seen the House of Blues in a long time.
Yeah,
I think other than Slash, I think Exodus, Slayer, Slayer, it's basically half of Slayer, Exodus, Testament, and Death Angel, and it's young kids.
Yeah. Well, it's because they've heard the folklore and their parents have been listening to those records when they were in the cradle. And I really appreciate that, like, when people like me, I'm going to play my kids, when I have kids, or if I have kids, I'll play
it to them
when I meet them.
I mean, you're a Boston guy. You probably have a kid.
I would say, like, Beatles, Iron Maiden, Anthrax, Ozzy, like, all the bands, like, I grew up with. But also then there's the stuff that I'm, like, really passionate about, too, like Pantera, and like, all these bands, Exodus, Cannibal Corpse, like, I could go on forever. And then there's also the new school, the guys I grew up with and my peers, Killswitch, Lamb of God, As Lay Dying, and like all that stuff. I'm just trying to say that, like, my kids most likely will have an eclectic listening palette, and I think that's what you're seeing. These young kids are like, my dad listens to Exodus, and I hate to say it, that music's hard as fuck. So these kids are like also understanding that, like, wait a second, these dudes are old, and there are bands that I'm into that are like this, but these guys still hold it down, and they appreciate that.
Now there's these people, like, you put on a Spotify playlist, and you put on Exodus, and now you have these 13-year-olds, and then they go and see the art. That's the other thing with this vinyl stuff that you're seeing now. It's like, everyone's like, vinyl, but for me, all it is you're blowing up Iron Maiden records so they look big again, so you can hang them on your wall.
Right. You're bringing back posters and records and cool shit. No, I'm like that too, though. I'm like a yacht rock guy. So, like, there's certain things that I missed out. My parents listen to, like, Chicago and, like, all that stuff. But, like, one of my top 5 bands of all time is Air Supply. And I'm, like, lucky enough to work with them now and, like,
That's
and
awesome.
bro down with them. And but I still go to their shows. And half the audience is, like, blue hair. And the other half is, like, young kids like me that are like, holy shit, I grew up while my mother cooked to the song. And when I say that one of the most powerful shows I've ever been to was one of my good friends, and your friends, most likely Frank Pino from Boston, singer of Waltham, for his birthday, I got him tickets to him and his family to see Air Supply. It was probably one of the most, like, overwhelming concerts I've ever been to, just because everyone's so passionate, singing the lyrics back. It was, like, so loud. I couldn't believe it. These guys are in their fucking late 60s. You know what I mean? And these everyone's so still passionate about stuff.
I was talking to Shannon Larkin from Godsmack the other day, and he was like, we used to make fun of Poison and all that shit back in like the 90s and all that because they
Yeah, but
dressed all
everybody used to make
stupid.
fun of them when they put the tank. But
Right,
look at them now.
Yeah. But then he's like, I heard Every Rose Has its Thorn the other day, and I was going to change the channel, and I'm like, damn, that's a fucking good song.
Let's just say I listen to almost everything, but the things that made me sick physically, I'd be driving to work and you would hear Three Doors Down. You would hear like all that 90s AAF shit.
Yep.
Like, I was swallowing my pride, I was sucking my balls, whatever that song is. Like, I would listen to that stuff and I'd be like, I cannot accept this. REM, like certain bands. Once I turned 40, I'm like, wait a second. All this stuff was really good. My brain wasn't calibrated for it yet. And now I'm like, holy shit, like, I like REM. I like all the bands I absolutely hated. So there is also age changes your palate as well too.
I remember when the Foo Fighters came out with My Hero, and I said, if they played that damn song one more fucking time, that dude from Nirvana, oh fucking A.
Right,
And it's
I
like
like
the
that
Foo
song.
Fighters is like the greatest band, and like I wish that they were on the radio more. And it just goes to show how much basically we've become our parents. Like now the music's noise, but the music I grew up listening to was awesome.
No.
It's awesome now. Lance Morissette, that's everything.
I can't discriminate against anybody, like their musical likes. Like I just have to take it for what it is and break it down. Whether I think a song's cheesy or like formulaic or whatever, and I'm like, I know. Like, you have to recognize exactly why someone likes that, and you have to just accept that that's the way that their brain's calibrated at the moment. And for me, like, REM was the band that I couldn't listen to, and now I'm older and I'm like, wait a second, I get it. I have a Spotify playlist called the Dinner Mixer, right? I don't know why it's called that, but me and my friend Fred from Prong and Buzz from Unearth, we've made this playlist to bum everybody else out in the metal backstage. But we actually all became very big fans.
It unified you guys all together.
Yeah, we're singing like Sponge, backstage, and my singer's like, "This isn't a metal tour," and like, but we kind of like get off on that, like, yeah, this is cool. We're listening to dog shit.
But that music was great, and it's good to have an open mind. So like that's why like people that like the Eagles and Aerosmith and Queen, they still like the Eagles and Aerosmith and Queen, and it takes a lot for people to change their mindsets.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because a lot of that nostalgia, when you go back, you're like, I haven't listened to this cumbersome song in 10 years, and you're like, I know every lyric, and I actually like it.
Yeah. And the 90s, I'm just going to leave you with this. The 90s had a very unique way, especially Radio Rock, to throw in a line that sucks. Like, really bad, but it's the most iconic, like, thing in the song that drives you to listen to it, because you're like, you make me nervous, throat dry, like fucking, you can listen to 311 and hear that lyric and be like, Jesus Christ, why do I remember that line? Because it's the worst one.
Why don't you smash that subscribe button already?